250 million people used this app. It was worth $1 billion. Then, in July 2023, the company moved its operations from Silicon Valley to Milan, Italy, and let go of nearly everyone who had built it. Evernote launched in 2008 with a promise that felt almost impossible: a single place to store everything you would ever want to remember. Your notes, your ideas, your receipts, your voice memos. All of it searchable, synced across every device, waiting for you whenever you needed it. The company's logo was a green elephant. The choice was deliberate. Elephants never forget. The company did. For 15 years, Evernote collected the thoughts and memories of 250 million people. And the entire time, it could not figure out how to turn that trust into a business that survived. When the end came, it came quietly. A note to employees, an office that was closing, a product that still worked, but a company that no longer did. The idea that became Evernote started not in a Silicon Valley garage, but in the mind of a Russian-born computer scientist who believed machines could do something human minds could not: remember everything, forever. Stepan Pachikov had spent years working on the handwriting recognition and software. His thesis was simple: the human brain is extraordinary, but it has limits. It forgets. But a computer does not. If you could build a bridge between what you observe in the world and what a computer stores, you would give people something genuinely new, a mind that never fills up. In 2004, he incorporated Evernote Corporation in Sunnyvale, California. The company had a vision and very little else. That changed in 2006 and 2007, when Pachikov's team merged with a startup run by Phil Libin, an entrepreneur who had been working in a similar direction. In May 2007, Libin became CEO. He was intellectually restless and completely convinced that what they were building would outlast everyone in the room. In 2008, Evernote launched into open beta. What Libin shipped was unusual: a free application that worked simultaneously on Windows, Mac, iPhone, and the web, and kept everything in sync automatically. You could write a note on your phone at dinner and find it on your laptop the next morning, already indexed and searchable. In 2008, that was not a feature. It was close to a miracle. People signed up not because of advertising, early Evernote barely had any, but because the product solved a problem every professional recognized: the idea you had in the middle of the night, the article you meant to save, the receipt you could never find. By the end of 2011, Evernote had more than 20 million registered users and $16 million in annual revenue. By any measure, it was a remarkable beginning. In 2012, Evernote raised $70 million at a valuation of $1 billion. The number arrived like a validation. Here was proof, as in dollar form, that what they had built was worth believing in. Tech publications called Evernote the most important startup in Silicon Valley. Phil Libin was photographed, interviewed, celebrated. But behind the headline was a problem no one wanted to name. Evernote's model was freemium. The core product was free, with a paid tier for users who wanted more storage and extra features. It was a common model in consumer software, and it had genuine appeal. Lower barriers to entry meant faster growth, and the assumption was that once users became dependent on the product, they would eventually upgrade. The assumption was not entirely wrong. By mid-2012, Evernote had around 34 million registered users. Of those, only a small fraction were paying. Industry observers and company presentations pointed to single-digit conversion percentages, which meant that for every 100 people using Evernote every day, storing their notes, their receipts, their entire professional lives, the vast majority were generating no revenue at all. The math was not impossible to fix, but it required discipline: either improve conversion or raise the price of the paid tier, or find enterprise customers who would pay more. What it did not allow was continued growth without a corresponding growth in revenue. Evernote had just raised $70 million and was being told it was worth $1 billion. Discipline was not the mood in the room. They grew: more users, more servers, more engineers, more international offices. The growth was real. The underlying tension, that almost no one was paying, became harder to see with each new million-user milestone. And in the noise of the growth, a crucial question went unasked: what exactly is this business? Phil Libin had an answer: or what felt like one. By 2012, he had stopped describing Evernote as a note-taking app. The note-taking was almost beside the point. What Evernote was really building in his telling was a platform, an operating system for human memory, a layer of software that would sit on top of your entire life and organize all of it. Libin called it the 100-year company, not a startup, not a product, a utility as permanent as electricity. To build that, you needed more than notes. In the span of a few years, Evernote launched a series of companion applications. Evernote Food let you catalog meals in restaurants. Evernote Hello helped you remember the people you had met. It would store contact information alongside the context of where you met them. Evernote Peak was a study tool, and Evernote Market sold physical goods, notebooks, bags, scanners, styluses, objects designed to pair with the app. Each one made a kind of sense in isolation. Evernote was already trusted. Why not extend that trust into adjacent spaces? But trust does not transfer like that. Users who had come to Evernote because it remembered their notes did not come to it because they wanted a branded bag. And more importantly, every hour Evernote's engineering team spent building Evernote Food was an hour they were not spending making the core product faster, cleaner, more reliable. The app had sync problems. It was slow on mobile. Search results were inconsistent. These were solvable problems. They were not being solved. Libin was not wrong that a platform could be worth more than a product. He was wrong about the sequence. You build the platform after the product is unassailable. Evernote had tens of millions of users and a product that was beginning to show its cracks. The 100-year company was building its cathedrals before it had finished laying the foundations. And yet, for a while, it appeared to be working. The user numbers kept climbing. From 20 million at the end of 2011 to 34 million by mid-2012 to tens of millions more every year after that. Each quarter, Libin would announce a new milestone and the press would cover it. Evernote graced the covers of business magazines. He appeared on conference stages to talk about the future of human memory. He was quotable and charismatic, and his vision was genuinely interesting. This was not performance. He believed it. The team believed it. Millions of users believed it. At its peak, Evernote reported more than 225 million registered users, a number that any company in consumer software would consider extraordinary. The growth felt like proof that the product was right, that the vision was right, that everything was proceeding as planned. But the number that almost no coverage mentioned, the one that mattered most, was revenue per user. In 2011, with 20 million users, Evernote had $16 million in revenue. By the time the user base had grown more than 10 times, the revenue had grown too, but not proportionally. The freemium conversion rate had not improved. The paying users were a thin slice of an enormous pie, and the cost of serving 225 million accounts, the servers, the bandwidth, the sync infrastructure, the engineering teams keeping all of it running, was enormous. Growth had become the story Evernote was telling its investors, its press, and itself, and it was a good story. The problem with good stories is that they can run for a very long time before the audience realizes the plot does not resolve. On July 20th, 2015, Phil Libin sent a message to the entire Evernote company. He was stepping down as CEO. In the announcement, he said he was proud of what the company had built, but that he was not the right person to lead it through what came next. The next phase, he explained, would require someone passionate about running a public company, the discipline, the investor relations, the institutional scaling work of an IPO. That person, he wrote, was not him. He was 43 years old. He had been CEO for 8 years. He had taken Evernote from a concept to a billion-dollar valuation, and he was walking away. The new CEO was Chris O'Neill, a former executive at Google Canada and Google X. He was experienced, professionally polished, and deeply familiar with how large organizations are managed at scale. He was not Phil Libin. He did not have 8 years of conviction built into the product's bones. He was a manager arriving to manage. The handoff was professional. Most observers treated it as routine executive succession. 2 months later, Business Insider published a piece with the headline, "Evernote is the first dead unicorn." The timing was not coincidental. What the article named, and what people inside the company had been living with, was that Evernote had not been growing in any meaningful financial sense for years. The user base was large, the revenue was not keeping pace. The product had been slowly accumulating problems, sync failures, sluggishness on mobile, inconsistencies that eroded the core promise of reliable capture. And while those problems accumulated, the engineering resources had been spread across Food, Hello, Peak, and Market, apps that most of Evernote's own users had never opened. Under O'Neill, the response was correction. He cut the side products, he raised prices, he reduced the generosity of the free tier, he restructured the workforce. These were reasonable decisions, but they arrived too late to restore the trust that the previous years had spent. And they came with a cost. The power users who had built their lives on Evernote, and who had been willing to forgive its problems because they believed in the vision, felt the app becoming something it had not promised to be. Slowly, quietly, they began to look for alternatives. Evernote's story after 2015 is the story of a slow correction that was never quite fast enough. Under O'Neill, the company made logical moves, cut the experiments, raise prices, focus on enterprise, reduce costs. But the competitive landscape had shifted in ways that made recovery very difficult. In 2016, a small startup called Notion launched with a product that did something Evernote had never quite managed: genuine flexibility. Where Evernote had asked users to store information in Evernote's way, Notion let them structure information in their own way. Pages nested inside pages, databases linked to notes, custom workflows without a line of code. It was the product that the Evernote platform pitch had always implied but never delivered. Microsoft made OneNote free and folded it into the Microsoft 365 subscription that millions of companies already paid for. Google launched Keep. Apple improved Notes to the point of adequacy. The market Evernote had been alone in for years became a crowded category, and the competitors had better economics because they were bundled into products that people already paid for. Meanwhile, the numbers told a quiet story. Evernote's revenue from subscriptions, from the people who actually paid, was modest in proportion to its user base. Hundreds of millions of accounts, a fraction paying. A business model that required those fractions to get larger, faster than they ever did. Here is the acidic truth that the Evernote story teaches. Business Insider called them the first dead unicorn in September 2015. Evernote then continued to operate, to raise prices, to cut features, to restructure, to survive for 8 more years. This is what slow failure looks like in software. Not a crash, not a scandal, not a fraud. A product that gradually becomes less essential to more people, while the company spends its remaining energy trying to make the math work. For entrepreneurs, the lesson is harder than it looks. Evernote is usually taught as a story about losing focus, but the loss of focus was a symptom, not the disease. The disease was monetization architecture. Freemium is not a business model, it is a bet that enough users will convert to paying and that they will pay enough to sustain the company through the growth period. Evernote made that bet in 2008, grew to 250 million users, and discovered that 4% conversion at a modest subscription price cannot sustain a company at that scale. They had built the best note-taking product in the world, and they assumed the money would eventually follow. It did not. Not fast enough. Not at a rate that matched the cost of the operation they had built. In November 2022, a Milan-based company called Bending Spoons announced it was acquiring Evernote. The acquisition closed in January 2023. The purchase price was not disclosed. In July 2023, Bending Spoons informed the remaining U.S. employees that their positions were being eliminated. Operations were moving to Europe. The app would continue. The team that had built it in California, the engineers, the designers, the people who believed in the second brain, was done. 250 million registered accounts still existed. Evernote still worked. If you open it right now, your old notes are there. The grocery list from 2014, the meeting notes from the job you no longer have, the idea you saved at 2 a.m. and never went back to. It is tempting to call this a failure of management, or a failure of vision, or a cautionary tale about losing focus. All of those things are true. None of them are the whole story. The whole story is this: Evernote built exactly the product it promised. It worked. 250 million people trusted it, and that was not enough. In the language of startups, they had product market fit. What they never found was business model fit, and the two are not the same thing. One without the other is not a company. It is a memory, useful, searchable, always there, waiting for someone to remember what it was for. Evernote promised to store everything you would ever need to remember. It kept that promise. The company just forgot to remember itself.